Hello, welcome to HR Huddle today, last Monday of April. We're glad you're here. Hi, Jen.
Hey.
And we are here to talk about a topic for not only HR professionals, but leadership. I think that's been our theme lately as we've been looking at what to explore. We have been worrying about people and their where they're at and their stamina and their mindset and their mental health. And so we are continuing to worry about, where people are in employee engagement, and performance reviews are going to be coming up here as we wrap up busy season and extension, I guess, the delayed busy season. But as we look at May, June, I know that's a common time for performance reviews. And we thought, gosh, we should probably pause and talk about how we should approach feedback, how we should approach employee engagement this year, and what we might want to do different, who's delivering it. So anyway, we have several ideas about what we wanted to talk about, and just really, hit that pause button and do some reflection. Maybe look up a little bit and say, where are our people at? What do we think is going to be the best strategy and approach to bring them in closer to us, to help them along, help them grow. That's what performance reviews are about, is how do we help them grow? How do we help them get better? How do we help them progress? But we think it might look a little different this year. So, Jen, yes, what do you want to say about that?
Well, I love this topic because I think it's so timely. I also, I know how, it's just one more thing for us to think about modifying because of the darned pandemic. And I know we're all so over the pandemic, but it's not over with us yet. So, I think that we just need to recognize that every person is an inch away from a breakdown of some kind. And even if they don't know it, they are. Everybody's sort of over it, fed up, fatigued, a little traumatized, frustrated and worried, wondering, we also have hope, and we're all up to positive things and trying to make the world better, one person at a time, or one garden at a time, or one corner of your house at a time. We know there's good stuff happening, but the truth is most of us have this psychic sort of bruise underneath us. And some people's psychic bruise is a humongous bruise, and it's the loss of a loved one. I had a friend die this morning from COVID-19, and somebody I didn't expect to die because he was 40 something. And I thought he would beat it, so you don't know what people are going through, and you don't know how close this thing is and how much, they've already lost, or whether their spouse or significant other has had some loss, whether it's loss of life or illness, or whether it's a job downturn or pay cuts. We just don't know what's going on with people. And because of that, we can't enter into post-busy season, HR busy season, our busy cycle of reviews, raises. Sometimes some firms do employee engagement or check-in, pulse surveys, that sort of stuff. We can't just barrel into it like it was business as usual. And I know none of you would. I know we all are trying to be thoughtful about this. But the truth is that our people probably won't take a whole bunch of feedback right now. They probably can't take it. Now, last week we warned you that we don't think they can hear, mandates of come back to the office and things like that. We also don't think that they can hear a lot of like, here's what's wrong with you lately. And I know none of us would ever approach a performance feedback session like that. None of us would. So I know that we're skilled HR professionals with the intention of having constructive and positive growth-related feedback. But we're worried that some of the instruments that we know that are out there to provide feedback, multi-raters, some of the ways that some of our more analytical thinker versus feeler, less compassionate technical professionals tend to approach the feedback, that this could be a really tender and traumatizing feedback cycle if we do not sensitize everybody to it and really think about the instrument of feedback this time around. At Convergence Coaching, we use keep, stop, start. Here's what we'd like you to keep doing. Here's what we'd like you to stop doing. And here's what we'd like you to start doing going forward. And I would think that it has to be something that simple or some sort of simplistic feedback. It can't be tons of feedback. I also think that it needs to be a limited number of stops and maybe a limited number of starts.
Yeah.
And if it were me, I wouldn't do feedback with anybody until I did a round of one-on-ones with the right person, with each person leading those one-on-ones to say, how are you really? Which we've talked to you about before. How are you really? And what can I do for you? And really getting a deep, serious check-in. What's working? What's not working? What do you need from me? If we don't do that before we do feedback, I think the feedback could fall into kind of a deaf, it could be tone deaf. It could be scary how off we are with what we say to them versus where they are in their listening. I have never seen such a disconnected group in terms of, just their feelings. Their feelings are hurt. They want to care about the work, but they're burnt out. They're fatigued. They're tired. It's just a combination of things. It isn't really about us or our firms necessarily, although those things could be grating on them in addition to everything else. So we just don't want to add one more thing.
Yeah, it could just feel insensitive. It's just like business as usual, and we are not in business as usual. And so we should not approach our performance reviews and feedback systems the same way. And so it could be, Jen, when you were saying like the keep, stop, start that we use, it could be, what do they want to focus on? What do they think that they've been doing well, and what do they think their next priorities are? And maybe it's shorter term. Maybe it's not, we're not looking a year out. Maybe we need to say, what does it look like through the summer and into the fall? And then recheck in the fall and say, what does it look like to get ready for our next busy season? And like, just even utter those words, it's like exhaustion. It's just pure exhaustion. So how do we figure out what that looks like and identify, what that is? And you might get some glimpses of that from just a check-in. How are you? What do you need? What's been going well? What's not working? And it could be, what could we do differently? It could be, what do you need that's not working? How could we support you? What is that? What does that look like? And then we can have, a conversation. Well, let's talk about what's next, in your role, in your career. What do you want? What do you want to do? What are you anticipating? I think that might be another good question too, by the way, is, what do you want more of or less of in your career right now?
For sure.
Be quiet and ask and listen. I mean, that could tell you volumes, just that question right there. So,
yeah,
I think on the engagement, idea too, Jen, it's not, we don't want to do like an employee satisfaction survey. I think that might be one of the most dangerous things that we could do right now is let's just gauge the satisfaction of everybody. Because we did a quick poll. We did a webinar for one of our leadership programs today, and we did a quick poll. How are you? Fabulous, tired, but hopeful and good, tired and worried, not sure, don't know how I am. And a couple of people said fabulous, and a couple of people said, I guess I don't know. I'm not sure, but mostly we're tired, but hopeful. And so what does that hope look like? What are they anticipating? What do they want to do that more of or less of, instead of like, how satisfied are you with the job? Because right now it could be, I'm sick of deadlines. I'm sick of them changing. I'm sick of not knowing what's coming. I'm sick of the disconnect between the states and the federal government. And the list goes on, right? So instead of asking that question, we can ask, some more maybe pulse questions. And check in, but not try to do this whole engagement or employee survey. The other thing is we want to make sure we follow up. I don't do a survey of any kind, even a short pulse survey, if we're not going to follow up with the feedback. We're not going to share what the results are, and we're not going to say what are we going to do with the results, because that will be the most disengaging thing that we could do. And so if we don't think we can commit to that, then we would just say, then we don't do that this year. And if it's something, maybe you're cyclical and it's every other year and this is the year, we're not doing it this year. Or we're going to wait till the fall. Maybe we delay it. There's a way that we could facilitate that.
Yeah. Well, and several things came to mind there, Tamara. One is, I think that this idea of not being transparent about the results. We want you to picture, if you're going to do this kind of a survey, that you are going to stand up there with some possibly sad results, and that probably won't get us anywhere. You could start with that now and say, hey, we know that things are tough. What would you like to see? How can we help? But I have to drag us back to something we talk about almost every time, and it's so so repeated. So sorry for that. A broken record. One size fits one. So this whole thing is one size fits one. You will have people in your firm that are chomping at the bit to get ahead. They want to know what's next for me with promotion. What do I have to do next? What goals do I need to hit next? What can I learn next? When do I get promoted? They're just chomping at the bit. And so they need these conversations about what's next. They need these conversations about promotion and raise and all of that. And I'm not saying everybody doesn't want to talk about the raise, but they may not want to talk about the promotion where it's more work. And they may not really want to talk about what's next. They may feel overwhelmed by what's next. You don't know where everybody is. So unless you do that one size fits one check-in, and you could say, well, we've been doing check-ins periodically. We think you need to check in pretty much when this whole tax busy season and the audit reports are filed. We think that you need to check in again because we think it's getting worse, not better. And we are hearing reports of people not just quitting mid-busy season, but quitting mid-engagement. And that is not a good sign. That is not normal at all for our profession. So we don't think a lot is normal right now. And we do think you got to get that one size fits one feel. Then you could have a better sense of what are we going to do with each person. And I know that's hard for those of you who have large firms. I get it. I get how difficult it is. I also want to say that we have to be so careful who we allow to talk to these folks. If we are going to deliver feedback of any kind, we have to have our most skilled feedback deliverers delivering that feedback, unless it's all good, praise or something. Otherwise, if we have some areas for improvement that need to be addressed with each person, I would ask, now, do we need to do it now? Right. Is it critical to do it now before fall, or before what? Or could some of it be delayed? Could we prioritize this feedback? What is the one thing that's most important to suggest? So I would really ask you to think about it, and not just on the macro, but on the micro with each person, and figure out what do we think that, we just have to communicate. And hopefully a lot of gratitude is communicated, a lot of appreciation, not just firm-wide, but one-on-one and very specific to the things that they've been doing that you do appreciate. And so, because feedback isn't just areas for improvement, but we just think the whole process has to be done by as skilled a coach as you can find. And we know that's scarce in a lot of firms, which means you might have to drag out the feedback cycle. And you might have to say to the senior leadership team, we're not going to get everybody's review done by June 30th as a check the box here. We're not going to throw everybody at review time this year. We just can't do it. Plus, by the way, your reviewers will freak. They're on edge. Mm-hmm. They don't want to do a bunch of check the box performance reviews. They don't want to have to give the feedback. I don't know if they could produce that quality of constructive feedback right now. So we just have to think about that. The other thing is, Tamara, I heard you say this, and you and I do it a lot, and so I'm going to call us both out for it. One of the pieces of feedback that everybody has is stop making the tax practice like the tail that wags this dog. People in other practices get irritated. They're just like, come on, we're over this. So we have our own COVID complaints and our own service delivery complaints and our own problems, and it has nothing to do with delayed deadlines for the feds or any of that stuff. So one thing to be sensitive to here, as we're contemplating what to do and how to approach the groups, is to recognize that by discipline, each group has different issues. And they still have issues when they're not in tax, and they're decent problems, and client service problems, staffing problems, morale problems, childcare problems, health problems, all of it. So we don't want a message from tax, tax, tax. And we've been hearing a lot from the young people that we coach that are in other disciplines that's wearing thin on them, that they hear like a bullhorn of, let's worry about our tax people all the time. And they're wondering, hey, has the firm forgotten I work here? So watch out for that.
Yes, that's a good point. And I think that that's part of, how can we make it actionable? And if we can make it personal to them and what they're experiencing, both by individual, by practice group, by kind of cycle and what's going on for them, we can be appeal to, gosh, we're really trying to pay attention and make it better and be better by, looking at that. So I think, trying to figure out how can we make it actionable? What does it look like? If we do have feedback for them, like you said, like what's the one thing or what's the 2 or 3 things that, gosh, we have to, start, working on this. How can we make that actionable? How can we look at what the timeline of it is to make sure it's realistic from an expectation perspective? And then, provide feedback and dialogue, ongoing to support them. And I think that's going to be really important. I think something else you made me think about, Jen, is maybe we need to pull together the coaches, the performance reviewers, and say, let's talk about this and have this conversation with them about where people are at. And then how to, strategize or, how do we best approach this? What is the best timelining so that we can have a consistent approach? Because we hear that sometimes too, is depending on who my coach is or depending on what group I'm in, I might get really great feedback and it's awesome. And I love this process. And other people are like, no, this feels like I'm kind of over here in the corner or, just it's not good or it's not at all, like I don't get enough or whatever. I have to go hunt it down if I want it, but it could be all over the map. And so I think this is really important. We probably should do this every year, but I think especially this year, let's pull together the people that are delivering the feedback and strategize how do we best do it, and look at the list, because maybe some of the people that I normally would do, I should do with somebody else, or maybe I'm not the right person this year, or how can we tag team it? Like literally look at the list that we have and see, are there changes that we should make? Don't just go through this is how we've always done it, or you're their person. It might not make sense this year, and so I think it's good to give permission to be able to say that and say, how do we best, tackle this, and what's the right timing, and what's the messaging, and what's the global messaging that we should be giving firm wide, but then what's the individual messaging that we should be delivering to.
Yeah. Well, and Tamara, I was just sitting here thinking about how, you and I have spent the last 21 years together at Convergence, making sure that people don't step over performance problems.
Yes.
Or that they don't let bad actors or bad behavior persist and bring the team down. And so I don't want to be heard that what we're saying is, let's soft pedal bad behavior here. If we have some people that shouldn't work here anymore, let's go ahead and handle that as soon as Labor Council tells us we can. If you're waiting to the end of some busy cycle, fine, but handle it. That will help your team. They know already that those people are not helping, or they're dragging the team down or whatever. And if there are people in the organization that are, bad behavior, angry, grouchy, that sort of stuff, unless it's new and it's pandemic related and you can refer them to counseling or that sort of stuff. If this is an ongoing pattern of behavior and it just doesn't fit culturally, go ahead and handle that too. And I know that might sound heartless, like, geez, Jen, Tamara, you are so mean. Those people, if they're doing those things, they're not winning at your place. They know it already. Persisting in that sort of uncertain quagmire is not good for them either. There are plenty of opportunities to catch jobs these days if you're an accountant, especially a CPA. And so we're not saying that. But, this could be a year. And I don't know. I haven't thought this through completely. But it could be a year that if you thought that you had like A players, and B players and C players and D players, it could be a year that for A players and B players that you say, here's what worked, and here's our gratitude, and here's your raise. And we're happy to share constructive feedback for improvement at another date. But right now we feel like we need to take the summer and appreciate that we are starting to emerge from this pandemic and that we can finally take vacations and rest, possibly, and that, that we made it through this ugly thing together, and we can come back and start working on a training program, later after we're rested, instead of just putting them right onto and here's what we want you to do next, and here's what we need you to improve. And there might be a need for grace. Right. And for the C&D players, we need to evaluate, how much gratitude, how much please improve, and if you don't, what are the consequences, like carefully and with dignity and with, worry and compassion for their well-being, but not wimpiness, because, poor performers drag the whole team down. Right. And they could be part of the psychic bruise that is, bothering your A players or B players, because they're having to drag that along. So
yeah, they have an impact for sure. And maybe, so you talked about keep, stop, start, just real quickly here, 2 other approaches that we use, and this is going to fit into the one size fits one is, I have an observation about a performance gap, and I wouldn't say about but I have an observation, and here's what's happening. What is your perspective about it? And I want to understand, or it could be palms up. We're having it's been a tough year and it's impacting the team, and I need your help. And here's what I'm seeing. And so if we can, come from that perspective, and then I can get their view versus I have this performance review and here's what you need to improve. And, it's all listed and checklisty. It's, it's that conversation, that 2-way dialogue and coming from an appeal, almost. And also, here's what I've been observing. Here's what I'm seeing, some of the impacts. What are you seeing? Then I can start to say, how do we come up with the solution, and how can we start coaching them, or how can we start closing that performance gap? What would they need to do to be able to do that? So where we have those, I agree. I don't think we're saying we want to step over those. We just have to be tender. We have to approach them tenderly. We have to be kind of investigative. We have to be collaborative. They're sitting with us, not, I'm, like I said, I'm checking this box. It just feels cold or something. And that's not ever the intention of a performance review or a development conversation anyway. But gosh, right now we could just appeal to that. So I think it's so important to consider that. And that's something else, again, to talk to your coaches about, those that are doing the performance reviews. Help them have the tools and the framework to have those conversations. For some, it's a little bit more natural. We want them to have the maybe tougher ones, but others, if we give them the tools, they can get there. Or if you do it with somebody else, they can get there too. But you talk about some different examples, of those gaps we need to close and how we can best approach that.
Yeah. And the last idea, which we'll cover in another HR huddle at some point, is don't forget, a part of gratitude, part of completion of a busy period should be some sort of celebration. And, in the olden days, we had the day after busy season party or whatever, or the night of the last day, or whatever day we deemed was the final finish line. And we'd have a party with food and drink and that sort of thing. In this pandemic, we're not doing that stuff. Think about small celebrations. We had a celebration last week for Administrative Professionals Day, and we did an escape room with a group of 8 or 9 people, and we had a blast. It was really fun, and it was super different way to use our brains and to work as a team.
Yes.
And we had a ball. I mean, and we didn't think about work while we were doing it.
Right.
We were trying to escape the jail cell or whatever we were in.
Prison.
But it was all remote. We weren't together physically, because we're never all together physically as a remote business. But, you could do some small team celebratory things or whatever, some kind of fun, some sort of levity, some sort of appreciation. Don't step over that either. Don't let the pandemic derail you from that. And your people are a great source of good ideas for that. Renee on our team hatched the plan for the escape room, and it was perfect. It was so smart and wonderful. And we may not have thought of it. Tamara and Jennifer, we're not the funnest. We can be fun if you bring us to fun, but we're not usually dreaming about it. And so maybe there are others on your team who are dreaming about things like that. You could get them engaged. And I have a client that calls the group that's thinking about that their fun brigade. and you get to join the fun brigade and, dream up fun. So think about that too, as we're thinking about what we're going to do at the close of this peak period.
Exactly. Love it. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you in May. So thank you very much.
Thanks all.